Hello, friends. This is the Connected Approach Podcast, the world's #1 podcast for connected leaders. I'm Chris Curtin.
And I'm Amanda White. Welcome to your warm embrace. How you doing,
On
Chris?
today, oh, I'm doing awesome. Thanks, Amanda. On today's episode, we're going to talk about boundaries. And Amanda, you are our resident expert because not only have you studied this topic and it's near and dear to your heart, but you're also good at it. And it's something that I'm continuing to try to work on myself. So
You think so, huh?
I do. I really do. Because I've just set a boundary
Great.
professionally, and I'm vacillating between congratulating myself and shunning myself every minute for this boundary.
Yeah.
And thanks to your coaching, you're the one that's saying, this is good. And so just talk a little bit about your thoughts on setting and maintaining boundaries.
Yeah. Well, I think too, Chris, because we talk about our top saboteurs, and I believe one of your top saboteurs is pleaser. Um, isn't it?
Right. There are several at the top. That
Yeah.
happens to be one of them.
That are competing, right? Yeah. Yeah. But there's a bit of a hyperachiever pleaser. Mine is not like I am not. So that's interesting to know. Like that might come into it, but um, yeah, I have done a lot of work in this area. And again, I'll reference one of my favorite researchers is Brene Brown, and her book, the one I just absolutely love. I've read twice, and that's saying a lot because I listen to more podcasts. I don't like to necessarily do the reading as much versus just listening more so. But her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, I think talks a lot about this. And in order to be compassionate with yourself and have self-compassion for yourself and others, boundaries is one of the biggest things to have and set so that you don't fall into this state of being resentful and judgmental because of maybe not setting a boundary and letting something go forward and then just being upset and worn down. So boundaries is really the work of being clear on what's most important to you and putting boundaries in place so that you can live into your values and be in integrity to your values so that you can be more generous with yourself and others. And so I do try to really practice that as best as possible. Do you feel that the fact that you set this boundary, like how are you feeling about it? Or how do you feel? I know you're like, kind of wrestling a bit with it, but in general, like, how do you feel?
One of my proudest accomplishments, and that's the funny thing, is that I've been beaming with pride
Yeah.
over the decision. And even as I've tried to explain it to others, it doesn't resonate with
Mhm.
with the amount of pride I feel making setting that boundary. And one of the things that or a word I want to share and we can just break down together is like deserve. Because you know
Mhm.
I we talk about the positive intelligence, and it's not just a program, right? I mean, it's really positive intelligence way of life. And
Right.
my judge is the altar boy.
Uh-huh.
I was an altar boy, and went through that very rigorous religious experience and private Catholic school experience. And so like that idea of what I deserve is a very to my psyche is a very kind of ugly word that I've had to work with as I'm setting boundaries or saying, hey, wait a minute, I have to prioritize myself and my own happiness. And that's something that, as the altar boy stands on my shoulder, he is shaking his head, you know,
Yeah.
vehemently about, oh no, you know. And once again, that has nothing to do with formal religion or whatever. It's all my sort of
Yeah.
my own internalization of these lessons and all of this in my own life. But
Yeah.
that's a real word of like,
So say
um,
more about that. Meaning, when you say deserve,
yeah,
it's like you deserve to like what's the sentence
yeah. The
that is
sentence
come through?
is, you deserve absolutely nothing is the sentence, and
So
so it's
interesting.
like, and so it's like, deal with that. You deserve nothing, and for those that you are pleasing, and for
Hmm.
those that you are boundaryless with, um, you know, they shall inherit the earth. Or I don't know. I wasn't going to turn that into
Yeah.
into a particular biblical quote, but I mean, in my mind, that's it. It's like, you deserve nothing, and so as you sort of give to others, there will be some foggy or ambiguous or perhaps never coming around grace that will be bestowed upon you that you won't really know about, and you're not really sure it'll happen, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
those are kind of the judgmental voices, which
Yeah.
maybe we should stop the podcast because we're scaring people.
No, but you know what? It's so interesting. What you just described is you have gone through this process, and I've gone. We've all, both of us have gone through this process, and it's daily work, to really quiet the mind, to be able to hear these voices come up, but to also have that map, right, of, because what you were able to do is to really get to why there was this uneasiness or this like hesitancy in what you were wanting to do. And you were able to quiet yourself enough to say, oh, I have to set a boundary here, because if not, I won't be living into my values and my purpose and being in integrity with that. And therefore, I will just run myself into the ground, which is not being generous to myself and allowing me to be my fullest potential. So it
Well,
it it
yeah,
is,
and
we're not trying to scare people, but for you to be able to have be quiet enough to hear that voice and pick out, that altar boy on your shoulder, which I love, right? Um, it provided you the clarity that you needed to be able to set the appropriate boundary.
well, first of all, shout out to your coaching, because a lot of this was, was the result of, and also the benefit of your coaching of me for, for setting this boundary. And so I'm so grateful for that. And I think one thing that really helped along the way as well was, through the coaching process, the end of that sentence of, if I don't set the boundaries for myself,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be living my values, not going to be living my purpose. That's a decent sentence. The thing that put me over the hump, because there's some, and look, we'll talk courage versus bravery, right? I think it was bravery more than courage, because it just had to be jump up and start running, as opposed to really measuring this. So it was probably more bravery.
Yeah.
Was, and if I don't do that, then the people I really
Yeah.
care about, the people I'm really responsible for, the things I'm really responsible for, are not going to get the right attention.
Right.
And that's when I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, okay.
Right.
Now it puts a whole new light on it. So I don't
Yeah.
know if you have a reaction to that, but
Well, I
for the
do. I mean,
pleasers out there, it
right,
might be
that
helpful.
is, it's exactly, it's exactly what Brene Brown says. It's that if you set the right boundaries, it allows you to be more generous, more compassionate, more loving, right? So if you did not set this boundary, you would not be able to be compassionate with yourself and others, especially through the holidays, because that's the time that we're in right now. And and you would just be, again, judgmental, resentful, not even really knowing it, but just like, like you just are in that kind of like state of like frustration, and all because it was in your power to do, right? And do it in a very professional way, right? But it's kind of being able to say, this is what is okay and this is what's not okay, because I'm clear on how I want to be showing up, what I want to be doing, the work that I want to do to be most impactful.
Hmm. Well, and it's interesting too. And we were talking a little bit about this before we started today's podcast about who's paying attention,
Yeah,
right? We're all like that nervous teenager getting dropped off at the mall, going like, everybody's looking if I got my cool jeans on, but like,
no one cares. No.
no one cares. And what I would say about this is that in setting this boundary, I did expect, or the or the judge sort of expected, like, well, they're going to come and get you now, or there's going to be, some
Right,
sort of
right,
lightning strike. And guess what? Complete
right,
silence.
right. And what was my response to you? I was
It
like,
was so brilliant, I forgot.
let it go. You got to
Oh
let it
yeah.
go. Set the boundary and let it go and move on. Because otherwise, if you're still kind of like, are they going to come back? Are they going to do this? Are they going to, you're still, then you're still not, you got to kind of like complete the boundary cycle, right?
Well, let's talk about
But
that. I mean, just for a little bit of fun, as we talked about it, and really it was a non-podcasted coaching session, which we're sort of reliving here, which is so cool because I excuse me, in working this out with you, I was extrapolating, almost to the, you know, to landing on the moon conspiracies. I was like, well, if I do this, then this is going to happen. And then this, and this person will talk to this person. And you had to stop me. And you said, what are you talking about? You already have this connected to like the JFK assassination, the landing on the moon, and all these conspiracies in your mind, not those
it
actual
was
conspiracies.
very interesting, right? And that's why I'm like, it must be because you and I both have like hyperachiever stickler, but I'm like, I must be the pleaser, and I just don't have that. Like, and whatever it
It,
is, yeah, I
it,
think it's and I would say, well, I don't know, I sometimes think when you have that like pleaser in you, it is maybe more difficult to set boundaries. But setting boundaries just in general is hard. It is really hard. But it was interesting because once you did it, even though you felt great about it, you still, like, the altar boy was still just trying to get in your head, and it kind of hijacked you for a little bit, a couple days.
oh, even today, I'm having to sort of wipe negative thoughts away about that. Now, what's remarkable about the power of coaching is the journey, because
Hmm.
for similar instances a year ago, it would have taken an emotional toll. I mean, in certain coaching sessions, I've broken down emotionally where on issues like this, where I am really, really sad and angry and frustrated, and um, really deep in my emotions, and in as I've experienced and had the value of coaching, your coaching, and you and I both coach with other people as well.
Right.
That percentage of emotion, that percentage of judgment just continues to decrease, and um, and and that just continues my faith in in the process and in the in the conversations that we have. I want to make sure for our podcast listeners that
Mm-hmm.
you share a little bit about, you'd said, ending that or completing that boundary cycle, and it might not be something formal that you have
Mm-hmm.
formulated, but just talk about your thoughts on how you do make sure that you sort of put a lid on it or put a button on it or continue, to
Yeah.
con- continue the resolve of setting the boundaries.
Yeah. Well, I was actually thinking of, I think we brought up on this podcast before, maybe it's another episode of, there is such a thing as completing the stress cycle. When you get a lot of stress, our bodies are not built to take on that much stress. So you want to actually like complete the cycle by like movement or doing whatever. So it was interesting. It's probably just more of my Amandaism of like, um, comparing the two, because I think it is something. It is almost completing the boundary cycle, especially when you're new at it and trying to put them into place. And what's coming to mind is that it is so important to have those people in your life that you surround yourself with that are like-minded, whether it's a coach or a colleague. We've, I've mentioned like having your personal board of directors, who is there in your life. And if you don't have these people, like you want to be really intentional about getting these people in your life. But like you said, we have each other, but we also have others that we call upon. I think it is that, once you put that boundary in place, it is difficult and it's hard, and you're going to be like, was that the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Because you'll feel like there will be a feeling like, yes, it was the right thing because it aligns with your purpose, your values, being in integrity with all of that. But you're still trying to change this like neural pathway that's just been like so deeply rooted. So you're going to continue to get these snapbacks of like, I don't know if it was the right decision. So to be able to complete that and reach out to someone to say, I just got to talk this out. I know it was the right thing, but why am I still hung up on this? To be able to like, just like completing the stress cycle and getting some movement or whatever, completing that cycle by just sharing it and getting it out so that you can move forward and let it go.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Does that
really
make sense?
appreciate that. It really does. It really does. And speaking of that personal board of directors, sometimes you need someone that is actually a member of your board of directors, like someone who's
Right.
great at finance, or or
Right.
a lawyer who's helping you with something. And I know that we've joked back and forth, but I've been taking this concept so seriously that I've
Yeah.
started to, I'm on this journey I'm hunting
Are
for
you creating
friends,
your own org chart?
creating my own org chart, and I'm like hunting for
I want to know what my
friends.
title is. What's the title on there?
The chief being officer.
Oh, yes.
Um, but I've been trying to surround myself as well with people that I'm as I get to know them, and as I share time with them,
Yeah.
I see that they have an approach to life, and an approach to issues, and other people in a way that inspires me. And so,
Mhm.
I've had these great lunch dates recently of other people that I'm meeting, and I'm asking like, hey, do you want to get together for lunch? And my
Yeah.
wife will kind of tease me. She said, you're getting dressed up for your lunch date. And they've been so great because they're new friends, and across a whole spectrum of life experiences, and in ways that I got to know them, and witness them. And it's just so great because the more I get out of my own head, or the
Right.
altar boy on my shoulder, and you see people who are creating boundaries. And we don't have to talk about boundaries, while we're, ordering a salad. It's just that as you talk to them about how are things going with your life, with
Hmm.
your with your job, with your loved ones, and you hear how they think about it, if you're listening,
Right.
and
Right.
thanks to coaching, I'm getting better at
Yeah.
that. You really pick up some gems where you're like, oh, that's a really mature and thoughtful and boundaried way to think about, those experiences that person's having. And it doesn't turn into a coaching thing, but when
Right.
you really are paying attention for that, it can be so valuable and refreshing. So just
Yeah.
wanted
Absolutely. And just being in that, you know, connection with that other individual, connection in and of itself is a superpower. Like it's just something that we need so much of, and I just believe it unlocks, the right level of thinking, to squash the altar boy, the kind of judge on our shoulder, and to allow it, just, I think, kind of opens up our thinking in a new way. So connection in and of itself is wonderful. And I agree, it just broadens our perspective to hear stories, as long as we're, with the individuals that are kind of similar on the similar path, right?
Mm.
However, sometimes you have a conversation with someone that's not, and it kind of bottom lines it even more for you, because you're like, whoa, that just gave me a glimpse into someone that is completely boundaryless, or whatever,
Mm.
judgmental or resentful or whatever. And you're like, yeah, gosh, I'm glad that I'm really like working to strengthen this mental muscle, because I don't want to be like that. I still love this person, but I just don't want to like show up in that way.
Amanda, thank you so much for talking about boundaries on this episode. Anything else you want to share with our viewers and listeners as
I,
we close?
all I'll say is that I'm so glad that we talked about it today, because in coaching and just in our work with individuals that are wanting to reach their full potential and really show up at their very best, which are the individuals that we work with, it is so important to be clear on what it is that you want, your purpose, your values, and then to set the appropriate boundaries. Um, I think the boundaries are really the biggest tool, practice that will allow people to get to where they want to be. So, thank you so much for this time, and I think
Well,
it's great and awesome work.
oh, thank you. Well, thank you for working with me through the process. I appreciate it. And as I said, I'll remain throwing my shoulders back and proud about, the work I'm doing. Well, as for our listeners, we look forward to talking with you again soon. Until then, lead well, my friends.
Stay true to you. Bye bye.